I'm going to show you step by step how to repair your front bumper for cheap. Stay tuned. If you're new to the channel, I'm Matt. I am working on repairing my front bumper. I have ran all my errands. I went to the auto body parts store, got paint, got a few cheap supplies, but let me show you the parts that I got and I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown of how much I spent on each part. Here's the front bumper that I am going to be working with. It was about $58 plus tax. I am going to have to do a little bit of repair because it is scuffed right here just ever so slightly. So I'm going to use some 400 grit sandpaper and a little bit of glazing putty, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a moment. And I'll leave a link down in the description to all the parts that I will be using to refinish this bumper. Also got a new inner fender here. That was about 20 bucks. I got the front, I forget what it's called, but that was almost just as much as this front bumper. That was about $55. And then I got a new upper grill. This was about $20, fairly inexpensive because mine is cracked a little bit. So I got that as well. Here is the damage that I am talking about. You can see where I had a little bit of a fender bender and I didn't want to risk going through insurance and them totaling the car out because this car does have quite a bit of miles on it. However, there's probably less than $500 my cost worth of damage here, and my deductible through the insurance is 500 bucks. So we'll see if we can't beat that and keep our car from being totaled. When I initially got into this fender bender, the inner fender did come off a little bit. I have since secured it, but it got tore up a little bit in the process just moving it. Last but not least, this upper part of the grill is cracked just a little bit here, which secures the bumper to the top, and just want to make sure this is in there nice and secured, and we'll just restore it to its original condition. Now that we have gone over some of the damage, I'll show you the supplies that I got in order to paint the bumper and do our repairs. Here are the paint supplies that I will be using in order to paint the bumper. I got an adhesion promoter, in which this was about $40. You'll need that to spray it onto the raw bumper so that way the paint will stick. We have a reducer, we have our hardener, we have our base coat that's going to go down. This is color matched to my vehicle. And last but not least, we have our clear. I did opt to get a little bit nicer of a quality paint. This is Deltron by PPG. I could have went with something that was a little more cost effective. However, I plan on keeping this car for quite some time. They were kind enough to throw in probably way too many mixing sticks, but that's okay. And I got a mixing cup and a 400 grit scuff pad. The base doesn't need an activator or reducer. However, the clear does, so it's 4 parts clear to 1 part reducer and 1 part hardener. I do plan on doing the rear bumper in the future. However, I'm just going to concentrate on the front. So I could have got away with half of this. Everything you see here costs somewhere around $350. If had I gotten a little bit smaller containers of clear and the base coat, it probably would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 bucks. And I forgot to mention, they did throw in some filters, and you'll need these, or I should say strainers, you'll need these in order to just kind of strain out any dust in the paint to make sure your paint goes down smoothly. I did make a stop by Harbor Freight in order to get a paint gun. You'll need is a HVLP paint gun, and this was $15. I kid you not. I've had a lot of success using this gun. I'll leave a link down in the description as to which model it is, and I'll leave a card up here to some of the videos that I have done using this exact gun painting my V8 bug project. Some of the other things that I got from AutoZone is a 400 grit sanding block. We have some glazing putty to fill in those little holes on the bumper. I got some spreaders for spreading the glazing putty. Last but not least, I got some wax and tar remover. This was about 10 bucks. This was another 10. This was 5. This was on sale for about 3. This was about 15 bucks and then another 5 bucks. I've got my bumper up on my workbench. First thing we're going to do is take care of this little spot here. The first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of our wax and tar remover and a paper towel. It would be ideal if I had some of the blue shop towels. However, this is what I've got. This is a very user-friendly degreaser. It's essentially water-based. It's almost like soap water, to be honest. So I'm just gonna kind of blot that. And I'll take another paper towel, because I did touch this with my fingers quite a bit. We're just gonna get rid of some of that grease. And we'll take another paper towel and we'll just clean it up, giving it the best chance for everything to adhere. I have some 200 grit sandpaper here and a sanding block left over from a previous project, so this didn't cost me anything. I'm gonna use that to knock down some of these high spots here. This is a self-adhesive back. Excuse me, it is 220, not 200. And I'm just going to sand in a crisscross pattern. And all we want to do is knock down the high spots here. Looks like we're almost there. I'm going to sand it just a little bit more. And I'm just putting light pressure, letting the sandpaper do the work. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna take a little bit more of our wax and grease remover, and I'm just gonna wipe off that dust. Now we're just going to let that dry, and we'll apply our glazing putty. Now that that's nice and dry, I'm gonna take our glazing putty, and you want a spreader that will cover the area, and we're going to apply this in really thin coats. So we're just going to poke a hole in here. You don't have to mix this, it's already pre-mixed. I'm just going to use a piece of cardboard. We'll put ourselves a little bit down, and we're going to go ahead and just spread it on. The camera went off, but essentially I just spread it like so, and we're going to let that dry. And once it's dry, we're going to sand it with 400 grit. I'll show you again once we sand this, the spreading process. I do apologize, my camera had died. However, while this is drying, let's go ahead and go over to the car and remove the bumper. This bumper is pretty easy to remove. We just have two 10mm bolts here, and then we have these up here, which are just plastic, and I'll show you how to remove those. You just pull those up, the center comes out, you pull the whole unit out. Now we're going to work on removing the rest of the bumper, in which we just need to remove these 3 screws here. It is a Torx. For those of you that do have a Chevy Cruze, it is a Torx 20. And I'm just going to go along and remove all 3 of these. Now that we have those removed, the next thing we need to do is just pop the bumper off. It's just held on by a few little clips here onto this particular piece here. If this piece is damaged on your car, you will need to replace it. Now, depending on your vehicle, like mine here, there are the turn signal indicator lamps, so you have to be careful once this whole bumper comes off not to damage the wiring. Just pulling this off, the whole bumper came off. You can see the lights right here, which I'll just turn them counterclockwise and pull them out. Same thing on this side. So there we go. Here is the front bumper completely removed. You can see where this bottom shield, I imagine for aerodynamics and to get the air through the radiator, where mine broke, so I'm going to have to replace that piece. They didn't have any in stock, so I may have to go to a junkyard to find that piece, or I may have to get it from the dealer. To save ourselves some money, we're going to reuse the indicator lamps. We're going to reuse what on a upgraded model where the fog lights would be. We're going to reuse the grill here, and the same thing on the other side. And we're going to be sure to retain all of our hardware. We're also going to use our little dampener here. Imagine this is for just to keep things from rattling, make it nice and snug. But we'll worry about taking that off later, because our glazing putty is nice and dry. Here we are, it's nice and dry. I can tell because it is a nice uniform color, aside from the parts where it is built up a little more, but it is dry and ready to be sanded with 400 grit. All right, we're gonna take our 400 grit block. We're just gonna kind of go in an X pattern, back and forth, up and down, and we're gonna knock all this down until we see just this little bit of glaze here filling in those voids. There we go, that didn't take long at all. I can still feel just a little bit of depth here, so we're gonna have to go over that one more time. I'm gonna get rid of all this dust and then we'll glaze over it again. So once again, we're gonna take our degreaser cleaner here and we're just going to wipe this down. And now we'll let that dry. Everything's nice and dry. We're going to take some more of our glazing putty. Just going to toss it on this cardboard here. We'll just mix it up a little bit. We'll take a little bit on our putty knife. We don't want too much. And then we're just going to go along with the surface here. And you just want to do a nice thin coat. Just be sure to clean your tools after the fact, so that way you can continue to reuse them. Otherwise, it'll be a pain in the butt. You can break this stuff off, but this will make it that much easier. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to go ahead and remove everything I need from the bumper, so that way we can transfer it over to the new one. We got everything off the bumper that we're going to reuse. Now we can throw this guy in the trash. Ah! All right, our second coat is nice and dry. I'm just gonna repeat the process. And we're just gonna make sure we get this nice and flat. I think we're almost there. We might need to do just one more. Yeah, just a touch more. Let's see if we can't sand it a little more. You can still feel it, just a touch. I think one more tiny little coat will take care of it. Once more, we're gonna take our wax and grease remover. We'll let that flash off, and then we'll hit just that little spot right there. We'll let it dry, and then we'll sand it, and we'll be all finished. Last round. Okay, that feels awesome. You gotta know when to stop and not overdo it. I think this was the perfect stopping point here. We're ready to go, so we're gonna move on to the next step. So we got ourselves a bucket, we got some soap. I'm just gonna put a couple drops in there. Just some regular old dish soap. Good enough. And I'm going to take our little scouring pad. I'm gonna toss it in there. You could do that dry if you wanted to. We've got our part sitting over here. Probably move it outside a little bit. There we go. And I'm just going to use that to wet sand the surface and just scuff it up. It already does have a primer on it. Let me move that out the way. But it does already have a primer on it. You gotta scuff it up, and then essentially we're just gonna wash it with some soap and water. Here's the packing materials that came out the inside of it. All I have is a wooden crate for this thing to sit up on. I might use that to paint the whole thing with too. So we're gonna get after scuffing this thing up. The soapy water will help get rid of any grease and contaminants on the bumper. And then we'll come back with some water and just give it a rinse, and we'll use some compressed air from the air compressor over there, and we'll be ready for paint once it's all nice and dry. All right, we got this thing all scuffed up, so I'm just going to take my water hose, and hopefully I've got enough length. I kinked it up. I'll be right back. All right, now we're in business. So I'm just gonna rinse this thing down. Get all that soap off. We're all done. I'm gonna let this dry. I think I'm gonna move it over there out in the sun. So that way it'll dry a little faster. I got this thing inside the shop. It's getting pretty close to being dried, but I am gonna run an errand. That'll help give it a little extra time to dry, and then when I come back in an hour or so, it'll be time to paint. So a little later in the day, you can see this thing is completely dry. The whole thing is completely scuffed up. That will allow everything to adhere to it quite nicely. So I'm gonna take my face mask, put that on, and we'll take our adhesion promoter and we're gonna spray the entire bumper. You can see I got a fan on, the door is slightly cracked. That will help just kind of ventilate the place. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of wax and grease remover. This is the solvent type. That will help get rid of any grease, oil, and I'm just going to wipe this thing down. It's probably not the most ideal lint-free cloth, however, we're doing a white paint job, so it's not going to show up as much if we have a little bit of dust in it. If you got a darker color vehicle, I definitely would recommend getting something that is lint-free and possibly using some tack cloth right before you do any spraying. Alright, I got my mask on. Now we're going to take this adhesion promoter and we're going to spray down the bumper. Alright, everything's looking pretty good thus far. Have a nice light even coat on it. That can wasn't the most consistent, because we did start to get a little bit of a run there. Not too big of a deal though. Aside from that, came out pretty decent. So we're gonna let that dry for a moment. If we do run into any runs, I'll show you how to address that. Nothing to freak out about right this moment. While this is drying, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the gun and we'll start doing our clear. And we'll start doing our base. Alright, so we're gonna have a little bit of fun with this. I am going to mask off this curvature here, so that way it is black. Same thing on the other side. And then the vent here for the radiator, we're going to mask that off as well, so that is black, and then everything else will be white. Everything masked off. You'll have to excuse the sound of the fan. I'm going to go ahead and spray. I think I'm going to try it without doing anything with the floor. We'll see how it comes out, because this is a white paint job, so we shall see. With this base here, it looks like we don't need to add anything to it. I think I'll probably toss about half of this in there. I'm going to put my gloves on, put my mask on, and then we're going to toss this in there, cap it off, plug it in, and then we'll test our spray pattern with this gun. This is the size of the fan. The more you turn it left, the bigger the fan is going to be. The more you turn it right, the more narrow, and this is your flow control. I'm just going to turn this thing all the way in until it bottoms out, and we'll turn it out a couple turns, see where that gets us. 1.5 to 2 turns. We'll lock it in and we'll go to town. You'll have to excuse the fan. I'm using it to evacuate the space, but it covered pretty well. It went on a little drier than I would have liked it to, so I think next round I'll use a little bit of reducer but all in all, not too bad. Got a little bit of orange peel going on right here. I think I just need to reduce it down, but it's looking pretty good. All right, second bite. It's looking pretty good. Got some fairly even coverage. I like how it flowed a lot better once I put a little bit of reducer in it. Looking pretty good. Still feel like it's a little dry over in this spot. We do have a couple of dust speckles over here. Not a big deal. Getting some orange peel, but we can fix that. Not too bad. Alright, I got the paint gun all nice and clean. Just used some acetone, filled it up maybe about a quarter of the way, shook it up, sprayed it out, repeated it again until it sprayed out clear. So now we're ready for clear. Alright, I think we're just about ready to peel this tape up. The tack is gone, so we're just going to peel this masking tape up, see what we got. The mask job came out pretty awesome. There are just a couple little spots here. We got just a touch of overspray, which I can wipe off with my finger, wipe off those imperfections, and then we'll go ahead and we'll spray this with some clear. A little acetone on a paper towel worked pretty well. It's not exactly spotless, but I think it'll do the trick. It'll look pretty cool. Again, this isn't a show car, and I'm just having a little fun with it, doing this myself on the cheap. So we're gonna mix some clear. It's 4 parts clear to 1 part activator and 1 part reducer. Let's go ahead and do it. All right, I've got my fan pattern all set. I'm gonna put my mask on and we're gonna get after it. Alright, she's looking pretty good. Nice and shiny. Do have a little bug here. No big deal. We'll just have to wet sand it out. There's a little bit of orange peel. Getting some trash in the paint, but that's okay too. What can be expected with a do-it-yourself paint job? But the way you fix that is by wet sanding and buffing it. So I'm going to do one more coat of clear and then we'll be done for today, and we'll see how it looks tomorrow. So there we go. There is the finished product. It is nice and shiny. There is just a little bit of trash in the paint, but overall, I mean, look at that. It's looking pretty good. You can see in the light, we've got a bug over here, but nothing a little wet sanding won't take care of, and a little buff and polish. But I'm pretty happy with the results. Well, it is the next day and the bumper is dry and ready to be reinstalled on the car. So you can see it came out pretty nice. No, I've said this before, but I'm pretty happy with the results. I'll be posting a video shortly after this one showing how to cut and buff and get rid of all that dust. But let's go ahead and reinstall everything back on the bumper. I gave my parts a little bit of a bath. We'll go back and do a detail on this, but for now, let's just get it back on the car. Well, there she is, all finished up. Be sure to keep an eye out for a video on polishing, just giving it a little bit of a light sand and polish. I'll show you how to do that step by step, but I'm going to do the back bumper and then we'll get into that. We're going to restore the headlight. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions. Until next time, peace out. Peace out.